15 seasons. Hugtto Precure marks the 15th consecutive year of the Precure multimedia franchise, and oh boy did Toei season director Junichi Sato, yes that one, and all the creative staff behind this season go bloody all out. This season is in so many ways a culmination and celebration of Precure, and in a much more successful manner than the last time they tried to do that. It reinterrogates and reaffirms so many of the themes and ideas that Precure has built itself around since its inception, while striking out with a couple of ideas of its own. Hugtto builds a warm cast with a couple of genuinely affecting characters that wrangled more emotions out of my stone-cold heart than anything in this series since maybe the crossover movie from the Mahou Sky era. It doubles down on the series' common appeal, consistently showering us with cuteness and incredible action scene after incredible action scene to an extent that hasn't been seen since Heartcatch, which I feel like I've probably said before, but it's honestly true, people. And it also created a new appeal in a few of the script's abilities to seamlessly weave numerous character and narrative threads to a degree that none of the rest of the franchises honestly come close to matching. It celebrates its past while boldly looking toward the future. It's pretty fucking good is what I'm saying. Let's start by discussing how Hugtto Precure is a thematic culmination of the series up till now. One theme that has popped up time and again throughout a few of the past seasons is the idea of good and evil being two sides of the same coin. Whether you want to call it hope and despair, or light and darkness, or what have you, the general idea is that in life, even as you strive for happiness, you will inevitably encounter hardships and suffering, but learning to accept and overcome those hardships makes achieving happiness all the sweeter. This has come up in Sweet, with its villain being the incarnation of the cumulative sorrow spawned from human hearts, the interwoven nature of selfishness and love in Doki Doki, love and loss and happiness Charge, and despair and hope in Go Princess. Feel free to name other examples, they definitely exist. Anyway, this season has its own spin on that concept, and of all those seasons I just mentioned, it does the best job of literalizing it. It's not just an abstract theme, but a concrete motivation, a tangible part of the narrative. How did Hugtto manage to pull that? Well, let's rewind back to the very first episode. Episode 1 sees our protagonist, Hana Nono, out on her way to school after a botched attempt at cutting her own hair when all of a sudden... For just a moment, time freezes. It's weird, but more importantly, it's unsettling, as telegraphed by the echoing cries of a baby. And then we're back to normal. We're okay. Well, Hana's not, but she'll be fine. The march of time allowed her to save this old lady, after all. From this very first moment, we're already being told what this season is about. Time. You can't stop time. Time will march on, whether you like it or not, but if you could, what reason might you have for doing so? This is where Precure's obsession with the intrinsically tied nature of the ups and downs of life comes into play. This series has always preached acceptance, learning to live with the tough parts of life so as to fully enjoy its high points. But what if you rejected that notion? What if you were so caught up in your present happiness that you refused to accept that it might not last forever? What if you were afraid of the hardships ahead? Then you just might feel like quitting while you're ahead. Then you just might think to freeze time.
I wish that I could turn back time.
At the start of the season, Homare Kagayaki is settled. I wouldn't go so far as to say she's happy, but she's more or less accepted her current position and isn't inclined to try to move on or change. She's a skating prodigy who can't bring herself to get back on the ice after messing up a jump and injuring herself. She's scared to so much as try, and the fear she feels could stem from a whole host of mental hang-ups. Whether she fears disappointing the people in her life or even letting herself down, What matters is that she can't push herself forward. She's stuck, idealizing a past version of herself, and fearing that her future self might not be able to attain the same or even greater heights. Her fear of that potential disappointment is so intense that it overrides her passion for skating, the joy and love that made her reach for those heights in the first place. That fear prevents her from reaching to the future. Thus, she's frozen in time. But you can't stop time. Life marches on with or without you. And are you about to stand there and let life pass you by? You can't let fear override your desires, freeze you in place. You have to march forward, match life's stride. Doing so, you'll almost inevitably encounter pain and hardships, sure, but if you can overcome them, there's joy and fulfillment on the other side too. By the end of the season, Homare has found that fulfillment, and she did so by, after receiving an injection of cheer and self-confidence from her pals, picking herself up and learning to live with and push past her failures. Throughout the season, she never stops failing. We'll see her fail that jump again and again, and we'll see her fall in love with a man she knows she can never be with. But even as all of that hurts, she never lets that stop her. It all hurts, but that's all okay because she comes out the other side having learned and grown stronger for it. She accepted the pain that comes with living and was thus able to find her happiness. So that's a pretty standard Precure take on the concept so far, accepting the bad that goes with the good and all that, but Hugtto goes just a little extra with it because remember, this is about time, and not just its inevitable march, but trying to stop it. This is a show terribly concerned with the futures of its characters. Many a past cure could be said to fight for the future, but this is the first time where that's a very literal statement. In a show whose message is about not fearing your future, about bravely stepping into it, the antithesis of that is literalized through the show's villains actually aiming to freeze time altogether. When the girls are fighting for the future, they're not just fighting for their own or fighting for it in an abstract sense, they are literally fighting for the future. So when this show is moralizing about not fearing the future, it's not just doing that with vague platitudes and pretty speeches. It's doing that by having magical girls use their fists and sheer force of will to force the villains and indeed time itself to move on. They're a shining example to follow. If they can do it, why can't you? If they can do it, so can you. In that sense, we're all, in our own way, Precure. One way that Precure has always been concerned with the future of its characters is through their dreams and life ambitions. What do they want to be when they grow up? This was of particular focus in Yes 5 and in Kira Kira, and definitely in a bunch of other places too, which, I mean, obviously, right? Of course a series about teenagers growing up is going to be concerned with what they want to do with themselves. But a lot of the prior seasons have featured characters who already more or less know what they want to do with themselves, and then it becomes more about finding the path to the future they want to achieve. But Hugtto takes a slightly different approach. Saya Yakushiji is an actor. Her famous actor mother is a huge source of inspiration for her, and her dream is to one day do an acting alongside her. This sounds vaguely familiar. Anyway, in episode 44, she actually achieves that dream, and in any other season, that might be it, but this isn't any other season. This is Hugtto, and in Hugtto, the future marches on. You have time to figure out who you want to be. Throughout the season, Saya isn't sure she wants to dedicate her life to acting. She wants to do the thing with her mom, sure, but after that, she has no idea. But as the show's repeated opening refrain stated, she could be anything, do anything. The future may be inevitable, but aside from that, nothing about it is set in stone. It's malleable. You can shape it if you just have the will to do so. For Saya, just because she was already doing something didn't mean her current path was carved in stone. Her uncertainty eventually turns to realization. She eventually decides on a new dream, a new future for herself. All she needed was the will to admit it to herself and those around her. Saya changes her own future, a daring expression of independence for someone otherwise as reserved as she, and in so doing further plays into Hugtto's message of accepting and making work for you the inevitable progression of time.
一つ夢を叶えたら、また新しい夢が始まる。もっともっと新しい世界が見たい。そんな感じ。
私たちの未来は無限大だもんね。
Hugtto's celebration of all things Precure isn't just thematic, mind you. There's also the very obvious inclusion of... Yeah, so, that's new. A rather pleasant surprise in the moment, and definitely the single greatest cliffhanger in the history of Precure, that's for sure. This season has 2 separate crossover occasions. In the first, Nagisa and Tonoka from Futarewa just drop out of the sky and hang around for a bit. In the context of that episode, they honestly weren't necessary for the drama going on, which involved best girls Emiru and Lulu. We'll get to them, I promise. They helped, I guess, but they were more a novelty than anything. At most, we got a good action scene out of it, but then episode 36 rolls around and... hang on a minute. What's the adult Kira crew doing here?
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
Episodes 36 and 37 just go bananas with the crossover shenanigans. It's pretty much one of the crossover movies crammed into 2 episodes. Because of that, they definitely feel overstuffed, and aside from a bit with Lulu and the doc at the end, we don't get much of the drama at the heart of the season that makes it so compelling, but it's easy to forget about that when all the cool shit is happening in front of your face. Like, dude, they just crammed in all the animation here, like, all of it. It's rule of cool on a galactic scale. It's a stuffed popcorn in your face celebration of why animation nerds everywhere swear on Precure like it's the Bible. I totally just made that up, but you get the idea. It's the purest distillation of one of Precure's main appeals. Cute and cool girls kicking all sorts of ass. What's not to love? Oh, look, they did the thing! They did the thing! Now that we've discussed how Hugtto is a culmination of Precure, though we're not wholly done with it in terms of the wider series, let's discuss some of its own unique focuses, thematic or otherwise. How deep into this video, and I've mentioned the main character once? Let's fix that. Hana Nono. Oh god, that just sounds so wrong. It's Nono Hana, but we are not glorious Nihonjin. I'm sorry. Anyway, Hana Nono goes through quite the personal reckoning, doesn't she? She's a cheerful girl in more way than one, and clumsy like oh so many pink-haired protags before her, but aside from that, her thing is that she doesn't have a thing. And she gets called out for it and spends a not insignificant amount of time having an existential crisis about it. Hana is the cheerleader, the ultimate supportive friend. She makes a point of always being there for those she cares about, cheering them on when they're down and generally being awesome, but aside from that, what does she do? And especially in comparison to those friends that she cheers on, what does she do? Saya is a talented actor who always has an audition or job lined up. Homada is always on the ice, practicing for and putting on incredible performances. And Emiru and Lulu somehow become local pop celebrities. In comparison to all the cool and amazing things her friends are doing, Hana simply cheering them on doesn't seem like much of anything, does it? So not only is Hana's one thing singled out as seeming somewhat trite, but the show also goes on to force Hana to question the very value of cheering at all through a direct call-out via Henry Wakamiya.
応援なんて誰にでもできる。その無責任な頑張れが彼女の重荷になってるんだよ。
In the worst case scenario, simply trying to cheer someone on, telling them gambare, might not be what they need in the moment. Hell, for someone in a certain mindset, it just might make them feel worse about themselves. So how does the cheerleader account for that? What is the value of cheering, and can it ever be enough? Of course, this being magical girl fare, cheering does have value, and it can be a source of happiness and inspiration, so long as it's not thoughtless. You can't just tell Homare Kagayaki that you believe in her. That won't do her any good if she doesn't already believe in herself. The support she requires is a boost of self-confidence, and cheering can provide that, but only if you know how. And the how isn't by simply saying you can do it, it's by showing her she can do it. Despite Hana's repeated refrain of hooray, hooray, the most powerful tool in her arsenal isn't those words, the literal action of cheering someone on with her mouth. Those words are a reminder that Hana's there for you and reinforcement of her support, but they only have power because the person saying them always acts to support her friends instead of standing off to the side. Homare isn't inspired to return to the ice just because Hana said she believed she could, but rather because she reinforced her belief by showing her that they were all capable of performing miracles through doing the whole Precure thing. Hana's cheers have weight not only because they're omnipresent, but because she puts in the effort and work to show that she believes in her friends. She leads them to believe that they can do anything by shining example, and thus is the most powerful cheerleader in the multiverse. Incidentally, this also ties into why she rejects that sword. Her power doesn't stem from weapons or the ability to hurt people or anything like that. Her power stems from her belief in the strength and goodness of herself and her friends and everyone, really. Precure, nay, magical girls don't need swords. The strength of their convictions is enough to change the world. Which makes it pretty wild when this season's second crossover movie rolls around and the Yes 5 crew just whips out a bunch of lightsabers, which they have. I don't... Okay. You're behind the curve there, girls. The future's waiting for you to catch up. I guess if you frame Hugtto against that, then it's a step forward into the future, and we're still talking about that. Okay, let's actually move on now. Divorced from the wider Precure context, let's just talk about this season's greatest contribution to the wider human experience. That's right, baby. It's time for the adventures of Tall and Small. Emiru Aisaki and Lulu Amour are two of my new favorite characters in media. They're both fun in and of themselves, but it's together that they shine. Their relationship is incredible, not just because it's gay as fuck and melts my cold dead heart, but because it's inexorably tied to their growths as characters. And that's just, you know, for lack of a better term, good writing. Like the show, let's take this one at a time, then together. Emiru is just a bundle of personality. She's the daughter of a rich family who loves to rock and roll, but that's frowned upon by her older brother. Wait, that sounds really familiar. So she has to hide her desires a lot, and thus isn't the most practiced with expressing herself. Thus, when she is able to express herself, she does it with such an over-the-top, no-holds-barred earnestness that you can't help but fall in love with her. She's genuine to a fault. She wants so bad to look after her friends, to protect and, in some sense, control the part of her life that her family has no influence over, that she just doesn't know when to stop. And therefore she just goes ham. And let's not fail to give credit to the animators and her seiyuu here. The former go all in with her eccentric character animation, and the latter just goes 1000% with her vocal performance. Mix that together and what you get is one of Precure's most delightfully energetic characters. Yes, Hugtto, I agree. And then we've got Lulu, who is in many ways Emiru's polar opposite. Aside from the staggering height difference, the most notable contrast is Lulu's startling lack of personality. She's an android from the future, which, side note, Precure is getting pretty out there with its weird sci-fi concepts, huh? I know this is a pattern because we've got Star Twinkle next. Anyway, being an android means that she starts out fairly deadpan. She isn't devoid of emotions, she just lacks any familiarity with or understanding of them. She was just a drone there to do a job, or at least so her villain comrades thought. Of course, she's more than just a drone, she's a person. All she's gotta do is learn how to be one, and it's in that learning, her growing from a cold, careless worker bee to a kind, caring, and empathetic person, facilitated primarily through her relationship with Emiru, that we find Hugtto's most emotionally resonant arc. Emiru and Lulu, as a direct result of meeting and falling in love with each other, grow into better people. Their relationship is meaningful and impactful to us viewers because it's just as affecting for them. The pair first run into each other in episode 15 and they immediately hit it off as a comedic duo, with Emiru doing her over-the-top shtick and Lulu acting as the deadpan straight man. This is a natural and amusing clash of their personalities, as have been established, but where it starts to get interesting is where their personal dramas intersect. Up until this point, Lulu's been trying to compute some unknown manifestations in her circuitry, read emotions, after Hana was the first person to ever tell her that she liked her, and then after breaking protocol to jump in and protect some kids in the previous episode. But being with Emiru, being witness to her problems, and helping her overcome them helps Lulu start to come to grips with her own. See, Emiru loves to play her electric guitar, but her conservative rich family, especially her brother, don't just frown on that, but actively try to squash her freedom and individuality. Lulu, being a third-party witness, is able to see through and call out the bullshit, not immediately realizing that even as she's doing so, she's lambasting the very same forces that are making her life so confusing and painful. As she ardently vies for Emiru's freedom, so too is she subconsciously pleading for her own. Thus, their personal character threads, once separate, have seemingly effortlessly come together and affected one another. And then the show just goes harder! That stretch of episodes from 15 to 22, with their focus on Emiru and Lulu's relationship, their personal development, and the corresponding interwoven character and narrative threads that all play into and affect one another, that's all just an absolutely transcendent set of episodes. There's so much I could just absolutely gush about with regard to those two, and that set of episodes, from the more complicated emotions that they aim to tackle, to that interwoven narrative structure that always keeps multiple things moving forward, and the song, and how these two just have the best transformation sequence of the whole goddamn franchise. But I mean, there's just so much, man. Like, fuck. Just, in short, Emiru and Lulu are the greatest. Their set of episodes is so tightly written, their personal growth's so compelling, their relationship so endearing that, guys, I think this is it. I think this franchise has peaked. Although, there's just this one thing with them that gives me pause, and it has to do with the season's ending. So, Lulu, Harry, the baby, and the gaggle of ex-baddies are all from the future, and in the last episode, after the day and the future are saved, they have to return to it. There's a lot of sad goodbyes, but what's important to note is that Lulu says to Emiru, okay, cut to the future, 2030, and the main three are all off adulting, but then we find Emiru and she's, well, she meets a small Lulu. At first, their relative heights being inverted was amusing, like, ha, now I am the tall and you are the small. But then I started thinking about how this came to pass, and a sense of unease came over me. Note, this is our Emiru, but this is not Emiru's Lulu. Lulu said she'd be waiting for her, so where is she? In order to answer that question, we have to consider what this show's time travel mechanics are. Hugtto is never explicit about this, so we have to do some guessing. The lack of our Lulu in this time has different explanations based on whether you believe there's only one timeline or multiple, and neither are very fun to contemplate. If there are multiple timelines, then that means that the crew only corrected their own, and when Lulu and co returned to the future, they returned to their own corrupted timeline and still have to fix that on their own, and even if they do, their timeline is one where the Hugtto Precure never formed, and thus Lulu and Emiru never met, so even if Lulu did meet Emiru in that timeline, that Emiru would be a stranger. In that scenario, our Emiru and Lulu are permanently separated, which, oh no. But what if there's just one timeline? That might be even worse. If there's just one timeline, fixing the past meant irrevocably altering the future, and given the lack of our Lulu in 2030, changing the future meant changing it into one where Lulu never existed, which means that by returning to the future, Lulu was essentially erasing her own existence. Oh no! So that's all kind of depressing, and honestly was probably the former option. But there is a silver lining here. While Emiru may be permanently separated from her Lulu by time and space, she at least hasn't let her lost love hold her in the past, pining for what's lost. She's lived a life in the time between and matured, not just literally, but as a person, as we can tell by her much calmer demeanor. She'll never find that old love again. The past is the past, but that doesn't mean she can't love again. It'll be a different sort of love this time, granted. Small Lu is now but a child, and Emiru's a grown woman who has a lifetime's worth of experiences to look back on. This new relationship can't be the same, but that's okay. It's simply something new. A new experience for the both of them. In the past, they helped each other to grow. Now, Emiru can pass on all her experiences to Small Lu. In other words, raise her. Be a mom, and in doing so, ensure the best future for herself and her child. And wouldn't you know it? Just as that's happening, Hana's giving birth to her own child. A child that will grow into a Precure herself and protect the future just as her mother did. And I ask you, what's more future-focused than raising the next generation of humans, or in our case, Precure? Thus, the show ends just as it began, with an eye for tomorrow. Alright, so that was a tad melancholic. What do you say we lighten the mood? Who wants to see some action? Precure has always been a magnet for Sakuga fans due to the series' consistently exciting and occasionally incredible action animation. This season not only recognizes that, but leans into that aspect hard. It doesn't exactly do much new with its fight scenes, but it does maintain a consistent level of quality across them, such that an episode rarely passes without something to marvel at. In fact, this season's first of several stellar monster battles, the one in episode 4, not only really got the ball rolling for the season, but is also an all-time franchise highlight. Actually, in general, episode 4 was where the season really started to pick up steam. It's no coincidence that it was directed by Yuta Tanaka, the director of Go Princess, and also episode 15, another fantastic one which was also the first Emirudu outing. There's lots of great directing bits here you could dissect. I like this bit toward the end of the episode where a dejected Homare is walking away from her shot at being Precure. Don't throw away your shot, Homare. And the setting sun is shining between Hana and Saya. They're the light she needs to reach for, but just can't yet. But I'm getting off track here. The cut of animation that this episode is famous for, that made Twitter explode when it happened, is, well, just watch. Like, fuck. I'm truly out of my depth here. I lack the thorough understanding of advanced animation techniques to even begin to try to describe how bloody incredible that was. It leaves me slack-jawed, and all the flowery rhetoric in the world can't do me much good here. So all I can do is stand from my seat and applaud at my computer screen and hope that'll get across even a fraction of how much I think this fucking rules. And now, before moving on to the final big thing on the docket, I'd like to take time to cover some miscellaneous points that I couldn't fit elsewhere. First, I'd like to talk about this season's fairy-adjacent companion, Harry Ham. He is both hamster and absolute stud, but the thing that sticks out most about him is the girls' kind of poor treatment of him. When he's first introduced, they mistake him for a mouse, and then he gets upset and corrects them, but then they continue to refer to him as a mouse throughout the rest of the season, and he gets upset every time. Like, when someone tells you they don't want to be called something, the correct response in that situation is, okay, you respect their identity, but the Hugtto girls just don't do that for Harry, and only Harry, which comes off as uncharacteristically rude and insensitive on their part, and I'm struggling to think of why this is a thing. Is this supposed to be a recurring gag? Is it funny? Did anyone laugh at this? Did any of the children in the audience even laugh at this? Why do they do this? Why? And it's especially weird because in every other way, Harry's very much one of the fam, respected, even loved by Homare. It's just this one thing that they keep doing, and I just don't get it. Next, I'm a big fan of how, in the future, in the last episode, Homare can be read as the dad of Hana's kid. Now, before you say anything, I'm not an idiot. I know that the rest of the season hinted at in the future, the big bad and Hana at least knew each other and might have been the thing, and in the last episode, there were some pretty disconnected shots of some unknown man in a suit with flowers running somewhere, but as far as I'm concerned, because whoever this is didn't actually show up, he could be an entirely unrelated figure, and there's no need to acknowledge his existence. Look, Homare actually showed up while Hana was giving birth and held her hand and was there for her, like Hana was always there for her, and it was Homare who did what any responsible partner and soon-to-be parent would do, show up for the birth of their kid. So you know what? She's the dad. End of story. I know that's probably not how this scene was meant to be read, but also I'm plugging my ears now. I can't hear you. La 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 la.
Okay, alright. While I appreciate deadbeat dad memes, I feel I have to step in for Tyranno here. The name is Kai, and I run another YouTube channel, Clear and Sweet, where I talk a lot about critical analysis of magical girl shows. The central focus of Hugto's plot conflict, whether we like it or not, revolves around George Karai, Hana's presumably future husband, and his corporation, Karayasu, or Dark Tomorrow Corporation if you translate it literally, and their attempts to stop the future from coming. But the puns don't stop there. The bad guys call upon monsters called Oshimaida, which literally translate as "this is the end" or "I'm finished." And it's all because hopelessness is the true enemy in Hugtto Precure. Having that embodied by a rigid, monolithic corporation, having mid-level baddies all be various businessy types who complain incessantly about company procedure, backstabbing for self-gain, hating their job, and social status should be fairly poignant, even more so in a country like Japan and its intimate relationship with soul-sucking office work and strong social pressures. So that makes it even more beautiful when the baddies find their redemption by changing their values and their futures, instead finding fulfillment in chasing their passions, running talent agencies, opening a bakery, being a real father, having a threesome with butler twins, being a construction worker and selling potatoes. Likewise, even Oshimaida resign when purified. And while the Precure embody these values of change, George brought the Karayasu Corp back from a future where it is heavily implied that Hana died, and his actions to influence the past stem from his desire to prevent that pain. He would have the world stop, as tomorrow won't be better than yesterday was. Hana's rejection of George's philosophy forms the thematic backbone of the climax and of the show, and in part of the genre. From her cheers in the first shot of the show to her daughter standing tall as Cure Tomorrow, everything about Hana embodies the indomitability of hope that tomorrow will be better than yesterday was. Using George's Mamoru gone crazy aesthetic to represent a warped idea of altruism that avoids change instead of embracing it and everything that comes along with it foils Hana perfectly. And hey, if you like thematic foils, boy, you gotta check out me talking about Sayaka Miki and Kyoko Sakura in my Madoka Magica breakdowns over on Clear and Sweet. Back to you, Tyranno.
La 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 la. Okay, now that we're done ignoring George for his dad crimes, speaking of Hana giving birth, this season had quite the focus on babies, which... always has been. I'm not the cynical baby hater I used to be. In fact, I've got some ancient animal instincts taking over and reprogramming my brain to find the little gremlins adorable, but between Hugton and all the babies at the hospital and daycare, I don't think they were very effectively utilized beyond, aw, ain't they cute? And I think the biggest missed potential here came in when Lulu was questioning why they were caring for the young when the job was so stressful. Given the season's thematic focus on the future, that was a great opportunity to wax poetic about how children represent the hope for the future, but instead it was something blithe and undercooked, like caring because reasons, which... I mean, I guess. Granted, this issue was somewhat rectified by the final episode, as we've already discussed, but the keyword there is somewhat. One last thing I can't go without mentioning is that the grannies in episode 29 are, amazingly, the universe's ultimate badasses. This one has muscles for days, and Hana's grandma doesn't even need to transform to fight monsters. She just goes and fucking bang. Like, holy shit. This brings new meaning to respect your elders. I love it. Alright, with all that said, I've got one last big thing I want to talk about that also ties into the season's larger thematic focus on the future. Yeah, you knew it was coming. Let's talk about Henry Wakamiya. Henry, like so many characters this season, fears the future. He's built his identity around being the talented figure skater that he is, but that can't last forever. Some unspecified injuries around his feet that surgeries couldn't correct for mean that his days as a professional skater are coming to an end. And then what will he be left with? If going into the future means leaving behind the thing he loves, is going on even worth it? What's even left to live for? Henry fears the paradigm-altering change that the future heralds. Of course, in keeping with Hugto's themes and refrains, he eventually eventually learns to not fear the coming change, but accept it. He can be anything, do anything, carve a new life for himself. All that's well and expected. But in doing all that, Henry creates a more meta-level paradigm shift of his own. He transforms into his own magical girl. Cure Infini. You can be anything. You can do anything. Thanks to Henry, that message is no longer about just telling kids in the audience that they can pursue whatever job they want when they grow up. It's been broadened to reflect personal identity with regard to gender expression and to maybe even expand the very definition of magical girl. Henry makes no secret of his love for dresses and beauty, regardless of anyone scoffing at him for not being manly or whatever, showing that neither he nor anyone has to let their sex determine how they express themselves, which is not only a poignant message for the kids that'll be watching this, but is also something that a lot of man babies could stand to learn. Hell, actually this show does have a man baby learn it. Emiru's brother, who starts out as a repressive, sexist ass, eventually opens his heart because of and for Henry, and the two are gay as fuck, and it's great. And on top of all that, Henry transforming into Cure Infini shifts our understanding of what it means to be a magical girl, because now magical girls can be anyone, even a boy, just so long as they believe in themselves and their friends. And I do mean anyone, as the finale has literally every character, main or side, boy or girl, tall or small, transform into a magical girl, just for a moment. You can be anything. You can do anything. Even be a magical girl. And by making this move, by making Henry into a Cure and all that entails, Precure is carving a new path into the future for itself. If Precure can make a boy into a magical girl, who's to say what else Precure can do? Precure has no limits now. It can shoot for the stars and beyond, which I know to be true because the next season is Star Twinkle, which sees its girls literally going to the stars. Just as Hugtto pushed its own characters into the future, so too did Precure push its own franchise forward through those same characters. You can do anything, be anything. Girls can pursue any career they choose, and boys can be feminine, Precure even. And I think Hugtto was able to so thoroughly and successfully explore and go into the future because it had an understanding of the past, both Precure's and that of magical girls in general. As I mentioned at the start, Hugtto Precure was co-directed by Junichi Sato. While this was his first and, as far as I can tell, only contribution to Precure, it makes sense that the season he directed was so deeply reflective. Why is that? Well, he's also the director of this other magical girl anime. You may have heard of it. What was it called again? Oh yeah, Sailor Moon! An anime without which the modern magical girl landscape would probably look very different and without which Precure would not exist. Sato, also known for directing works such as the Aria franchise and Princess Tutu, given his deep ties to such a seminal work of the magical girl genre, well, it's no stretch to say that he has a deeper relationship with and understanding of the genre than any of us peons basking in his excellence. Given that, it's no wonder that when he was brought on to direct a season of one of the most pervasive magical girl shows since his own, during its big 15th anniversary celebratory blowout, he ended up producing a show that not only reflected a deep understanding of its franchise and genre, but painted a portrait of what an exciting new future for this franchise and genre could look like. But I'm not saying that Junichi Sato deserves 100% of the credit. On top of sharing a co-directing credit with Precure veteran Akifumi Zako, nailing down any specific moments that are like, yes, he definitely made this, is usually a fool's errand. You could point to Hana's sword moment as a callback to the Sailor Moon finale, but aside from that, his job as a director may have been more broad in scope, making calls on overarching narrative and character beats as opposed to dictating the moment-to-moment progression of any given episode. His directing approach is more about letting the creative energy of the show staff shine. Here he is tweeting his awe of the spectacular work that went into episode 4, like he had no part of it and was just an outside observer. That's not to say he actually was, just look at the fact that he did storyboards for episode 5. The broader point here is just that we can't know the exact level of influence his directing had on everything, but we can certainly feel his presence. Given that, I think I can confidently say that in the hands of any other director or pair of directors, this season would not have come out near as strong or thematically cohesive as it did, so props to them. And of course to all the staff at Toei who poured their overworked souls into this corporate machine. You all nailed it. And that all, finally, is Hugtto Precure. It was pretty fucking good. It had an eye for the future. It knew what we all loved about Precure and played into those strengths while making sure to show us something new and attempting to push its franchise forward. It had two of the greatest, most lovable characters in the whole damn franchise. It was consistently exciting in its presentation, and its consistent thematic focus made the whole feel more cohesive than almost every other season. It was an excellent celebration of itself, everything that came before and the future, and that is something worth celebrating. Thanks for sitting through my ramblings about a children's magical cartoon show. What did you think about this season? Anything cool that I didn't mention? Leave them thoughts in the comments and make sure to do all the other things that please the YouTube algorithm. Special thanks to my pal Kai, who contributed that bit about Deadbeat George, and who also helped me flesh out some other parts of this video. Please check out his channel, Clear and Sweet. It is excellent. Next month's video, I'm not quite certain of yet. I promised a certain thing, but then it turned out that thing was 50 episodes, and while it's still happening, I'm not sure about the timing of it, so we'll see. Anyway, that'll do it for me. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to be gay and do crimes.